Alright folks, welcome back. So this is the tutorial. I'm going to try to break it down into 10-minute time frames. This is going to be the tutorial on how to build your own RC H.I.S.S tank. So the RC H.I.S.S tank is it's gonna be a challenge, but the first hurdle in order for you to start your own build is getting a hold of that Radio Shack dyno track. That Radio Shack dyno track, it took me a long time searching for a track that has that triangular shape drive train for the H.I.S.S tank, just like the H.I.S.S tank. Luckily, I came across this one after years and years of searching, and all you have to do is flip it, and there you go. It is actually the same exact shape as a H.I.S.S tank, the original H.I.S.S tank. We got lucky on this one, folks. And another good thing is that the engine is on top, so it does give you a little bit of clearance on the bottom. Not much, but still. Otherwise, it would be flat, and it would be very close to the ground. I'll give you a little bit of review on the functionality of the H.I.S.S tank. But so once you get a hold of the dyno track, one of the biggest hurdles is actually going to be modifying the original dyno track to the H.I.S.S tank's wheelbase. That wheelbase, as you can tell, is short, and the original RC is a little bit longer. So once you get it, you take off the body. When you take off the body, make sure you remove the battery cover, and then there's a one screw here, and then the second screw from the top. That's going to be for to be able to remove the body. Once you get rid of the body, then you can start working on the inside. So once you start getting ready to work on the inside, don't worry about the circuit board here, unless you want to use the same circuit board, which you absolutely can. It's really an old school circuit board. It doesn't have any proportionality, so it's go and stop. That's it. It's just one speed. Pretty hard to control back in the days. It would be okay to do that, but if you can, upgrade that, since you're going to be upgrading everything anyways. If you do decide to get rid of the circuit board, go ahead and cut the wires from the circuit board, not from back here. That way it gives you a lot more wire to work with when you're starting to do your custom. So once you get rid of the circuit board, cut the wires from here, then we can move up to the axles. What we're going to do is we're going to shrink down this whole all these axles by this much distance from all the axles from these points. Right, but in order to get to the axles, before you make these cuts, then you want to shrink down the axles first. Once you get ready to do that, you're going to go ahead and remove the battery cover, the motor cover, or engine cover I should say, by removing these 4 screws here. Once you remove those 4 screws, you can go ahead and pop the top off. And don't worry about taking off the top. It's not, this portion does not have any say so on all these gears. When you take apart RC, sometimes when you take off the cover, then all these little sprockets and whatnots, they kind of run around loose, and it's pretty hard to get back. But this one, fortunately enough, was built pretty cool. It's pretty self-sustaining as far as the whole engine's concerned, or motor. I keep on using motor and engine differently, so pardon me. I'm not too technical on that. So once you do that, clean out the insides. It's old. We're talking about 30-year-old RC here. So clean it out if there's any kind of carpet residue, any dust. One of the things that you do want to take note that I noticed, I took apart 3 of these, and this sprocket here is always cracked. I don't know if it's a factory defect or just wear and tear, but I'm starting to think that it's a factory defect. but this sprocket always has a crack on it. What I did was I scarred the axle here, and then I put glue. So I used any kind of crazy glue, and then I used Johnny Weld, which is an aggregate. It just strengthens that bond. So if you can do that, and then that should reinforce that, and it should take care of any problems in the future. This sprocket has always been good, and there's no problems here with it. I've never seen it crack, but I would definitely inspect it. Alright, so now you have now you want to work on the axles. So when you work on the axles, take note that this bottom axle is going to be the easiest ones to work on, because it's got a screw. You just unscrew this, you take off the wheel, and you have access to that axle. These other ones, they have a little bit more solid construction here. I don't suggest you grinding away on this, because this is a solid piece. You probably would destroy the wheel. There's a better way to get to those. But the bottom one, you take off that screw, take off the wheel, put it off to the side, and then what you're going to do is cut with your Dremel, cut the plastic from that point to that point. So let this be flush, and then on both sides. Take note and take measurement of how much you're going to cut here and here. You're going to add those two. You're going to add those two, and you're going to take off from the axle. So on this, you're going to take this measurement, and then when you take off the wheel, you're going to have a hex here. Go ahead and with your Dremel again, cut that much distance from that hex. And that hex is long enough where you can still put the wheel, and that screw is still going to grab onto the threads. So that's taken care of. Once you do that on both sides, then you're going to come to that distance. So that's going to be that back axle. So now you have access to this one. Now you're going to work on this axle. On this axle is going to be a little bit more challenging, because you don't necessarily have access to it. So you're going to take off these screws, these two screws. You're going to take off this top. You're going to get access to the axle. If you don't want to do that, then you could just cut the axle, and then you could take off this wheel and that wheel, put it off to the side, and then you're going to cut that distance from there on both sides. Once you do that, you're going to cut that axle. You're going to have two pieces of the axle, and then you're going to have that same distance that you had the original one from the original axis. So what you're doing is basically, this is the axle. Let's pretend this is the axle, right? You're going to cut the distance of what you cut from the plastic. So you add this distance plus this distance equals, say, 2 and 2. Then you're going to take off a 4 units here. So now you're going to have a shorter axle. Once you have that shorter axle, what I suggest, you could use any tubing, but I would suggest any kind of telescopic antenna from an RC. If you go to Goodwill, you could probably find these, or if you have RCs lying around with telescopic antennas, they offer you a wide variety of tubes. Alright, so find the right tube that's closest to that axle, and then join them back together, and then glue it in place. Once you do that, then you're set as far as that's concerned. You're going to do the same with this front axle. Alright, same concept, nothing different. You gain access to that axle by taking out these two screws, and then you're going to have a little cap here. Inside this unit here, there's a tiny bit of a spring that allows that axle to do that. If you want to keep that spring, which I suggest you do, just to keep that tension, go ahead and be careful when you take off that cap. When you take off that cap, just make sure that you watch that spring. If it pops up, you keep an eye on it. You're not searching for it on the floor. But same concept. You're going to cut that axle in half. You're going to go ahead and cut the axle and then rejoin it when it's shorter. That way you can have the same distance. And the only distance that you're going to cut from the plastic is going to be from this point, from where this little triangle meets up. Alright, just cut it as close as possible. And then you're set as far as making that distance.